Headlights slice through the darkness, radios buzz with urgency, and somewhere in that narrow stretch of time, everything changed. What first seemed like scattered reports has now grown into a complex web of records, timestamps, and unanswered questions. Before we dive deeper, hit the subscribe button and turn on your notification bell so you get first-hand updates on this story and others as new details continue to unfold. Dispatch logs have become one of the most revealing pieces of this investigation. These real-time records show that multiple vehicles were repeatedly spotted near key locations during the exact time frame of the disappearance. These weren't isolated mentions logged once and forgotten. The same types of vehicles appeared again and again, sometimes minutes apart, often near rural roads, turnoffs, and areas that later proved significant to the case. Because dispatch logs are created as events happen, they capture raw information before narratives form, making them especially valuable. When similar vehicle sightings appear across different calls and entries, patterns begin to emerge, raising questions about who was present, why they were there, and whether their movements intersected with critical moments. Supporting those logs is a call metadata behind them. Every call carries precise timestamps, durations, and routing details, allowing investigators to reconstruct timelines with accuracy that human memory alone cannot provide. This metadata shows exactly when information entered the system and how quickly it moved. By layering this data over known events, investigators can identify gaps, delays, and overlaps that reshape the understanding of what was possible during those hours. It also allows analysts to test movement scenarios, whether a vehicle reported in one location could realistically appear somewhere else within the time suggested. In a rural setting with long distances and limited routes, these calculations matter. Metadata doesn't speculate, it anchors the investigation to verifiable facts. When witness accounts were placed against this data, cracks began to appear. Several individuals who said they were fishing in the area provided timelines that didn't fully align with dispatch records or other documented activity. At first glance, these accounts seemed harmless, even routine. But when arrival and departure times were compared with call logs and vehicle sightings, inconsistencies surfaced. Some witnesses placed themselves in locations during periods when records suggest activity elsewhere, or when others reported those areas as empty. These discrepancies don't automatically imply dishonesty. Memory is imperfect, especially under stress. But when multiple details fail to line up, those accounts require closer scrutiny. Two vehicles, in particular, stand out across the records, a black SUV and a Kia Sportage. What makes them notable is not just their presence, but their repetition. They appear across independent dispatch entries logged by different sources at different times. Independent corroboration strengthens significance, and in this case, it suggests these vehicles were not simply passing through once. They were moving within the area over a sustained period. Yet despite their prominence in the logs, public clarity remains limited. Authorities have not clearly stated whether these vehicles were definitively identified, ruled out, or remain under investigation. That lack of transparency has fueled speculation and frustration, leaving the public with more questions than answers. As analysts continued piecing the timeline together, conflicting timestamps began altering what movement scenarios were even plausible. In rural environments, travel is constrained by geography. Roads are few, distances are long, and travel times cannot be easily compressed. When timestamps suggest movement that defies these realities, investigators must reassess which data points are reliable. Each adjustment reshapes conclusions about opportunity and access, making timeline accuracy one of the most critical elements of a case. Geographic mapping added another layer of clarity and concern. By plotting witness claims against actual terrain, sightlines, and access routes, investigators identified vantage points that appear implausible. Some witnesses described seeing areas that would have been obstructed by vegetation or elevation. Others claimed access routes that maps and on-site analysis suggest are impractical within the time frames given. Mapping turns statements into spatial reality, revealing whether observations could physically occur as described. When they cannot, investigators must determine whether the issue lies with memory, perception, or something more troubling. Search efforts also came under renewed scrutiny. Early helicopter searches were described as extensive, covering large areas from the air. Yet later discoveries of evidence in locations believed to have been searched raised difficult questions. Aerial searches are powerful tools, but they are not infallible. Factors like lighting, altitude, and dense vegetation can obscure critical details. Still, when evidence surfaces in supposedly cleared zones, it forces investigators to consider whether something was missed, whether assumptions about coverage were overstated, or whether evidence appeared later. Physical evidence on the ground further challenged early assumptions. Clustered boot prints found in specific areas did not align with the idea of prolonged wandering. Instead of a trail suggesting long-distance movement, the prints were concentrated, implying limited movement or repeated presence in a small zone. This pattern raises questions about how long the child was in that area and whether others were involved. Finally, attention has turned to the handling of a pink blanket linked to the case. Concerns have been raised about how it was collected, stored, and documented. In any investigation, the integrity of evidence is paramount. Even the perception of contamination or weak chain of custody procedures can undermine confidence and complicate legal outcomes. Clear documentation and transparency are essential to ensure that evidence remains reliable. Taken together, these elements paint a picture of an investigation shaped not by a single breakthrough, but by how details intersect or fail to. Dispatch logs, metadata, witness accounts, geography, search methods, and evidence handling all point to one central lesson: precision matters. As timelines are refined and assumptions re-examined, the truth will depend not on speculation, but on careful analysis, accountability, and the willingness to confront uncomfortable inconsistencies head-on.